Thank you. And please come back in 2025.
January 14th.
You see now why Frank is invaluable. Yes. You know more dates.
1066,
Yeah.
476.
Look at, he is a veritable encyclopedia. Yes, yes. And 1066 we're gonna get to, and as just sort of a bait to lure you to 2025, you'll find out more you ever wanted to know about the Normans, but were afraid to ask in the new year, either by Zoom or in person, because I have got a lot to say about Normans. And it's not like I don't like other people, but let's face it, any medievalist, I'm sure, would agree with me about Normans. On the other hand, we've also got to think about also Rands, might have beens. This fellow, could you imagine being the cover of Soldier of Fortune? Wouldn't he be a good example? He doesn't look like the sort you'd say, hey, let's get together and maybe have adult beverages and just hang out, maybe have a poetry reading or something of the sort, like maybe we can go to celebrate services for All Saints, because that's coming up November 1st, some of you know. I don't think so. I think he's ready for some action. Seriously, he was very different from my friends in Oslo today. As King of Norway, he fought in Constantinople. He was available, as they said in the old television series, had weapons will travel. I'm paraphrasing, but you get the idea. He was available. And of course, the name Harold, and notice the spelling, will become a significant figure in our story. Of course, what's a discussion of 1066 without a tree, right? You can't do without a tree. And I asked Frank that we could get the Norman end of this because I wanted you to know about Rollo. Rollo, that's an interesting name, and it's like a cartoon character, but Rollo was far from that. He was a Norwegian leader of great strength. You see him way up there at the beginning of the tree. And Rollo, I guess you say we have to bring him out, clean him up, and get him baptized and so forth, but he will turn out real well, if I do say so myself, well enough that he was able to convince the then King of France, as we would know it, who was sadly for him known as Charles the Simple, which gives you a bad impression. I mean, it just means, so they say, it meant that he was Charles the Straightforward, but whatever the kid, I know. Maybe that's just a cover, because simple generally doesn't have a good significance. The important thing that we need to know about him is he had Charlemagne's blood in him, so he had good family tree. Rollo had conquered that wonderful part of France that so many of us love, that we know as Normandy. And Charles, who is not the strongest of kings, I wish I could go into this story, but got to move on. He basically was giving Charles a hard time. And Charles said, you know what I would love for you to do? I would love for you to be my son-in-law. You say, will there be marriage counseling? Will they spend time together and dating app, that kind of thing. No. But in addition to all, he said, you know what else I'm going to do? I'm going to use a lot of land. Probably the forces of Rollo were already occupying it. He said, well, that sounds great. I don't know what translators they were using, but somehow they got the message through that Rollo would then become what we would call the first Duke of Normandy. The amazing anecdote about this is Rollo, you might say, was a little shy about doing fealty and homage. You know, he didn't like to bow. And sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do. Because Charles said, now you got to, give me your homage. So Rollo said, here's the way I'm going to give you homage. So Rollo would basically get one of his Norsemen, and he said, I'll kiss your foot. And he picked it up, and King went over, which was kind of rude. But I know, you think about that. But it's not like Rollo was going to get down. But somehow the marriage went on. You're glad to find that out. And he got what we call Normandy. Did this mean everything was fine? No. I don't think Rollo's going into pacifism. I think there's still going to be lots of conflicts, but Normandy will go from there. And the dukes, as has been written about frequently in the 20th century and even today, became a great center of medieval civilization up until the time of our big hero, William. And of course, there he is all the way down till see him at the end. That whole thing is basically to set it up for you to see the various, shall we say, contestants, because we've already seen Harold Hardrada, and we'll come back to him. There's Edward the Confessor and that wife who may be plotting a veritable Anglo-Saxon Mata Hari or Norman. And there is Harold, her brother, who is also an important figure. Because, see, 1066, very busy year, he had succeeded his brother-in-law in the early part of 1066. Because remember, Edward the Confessor pursued a life of chastity, so there are no heirs, except for brother-in-law, and that's sort of like, gosh, the only thing makes me happy is knowing you will be my heir. I wasn't there, but I'm just telling you, that's the official party line among the Harold set. So he was the king by that fateful year, 1066. Not at first, because Edward the Confessor hung on a little bit. Now, there we have a beautiful area that so many of us have been to and love, and understand that Mont Saint-Michel, that's very, very interesting area. And again, I know I don't need to tell tourists in the group what a great vacation one can have in this particular area. But the Norse, or at least some, settled there and home away from home, I guess you'd say. So they are, I suppose, kissing cousins of the Norwegians. Norsemen, as they are rightly called, then become Normans, because that's the way the word comes. And that's also to note that he was married to a Carolingian, that is Rollo, because he was married to the daughter of Charles the Simple. All of this is significant because of what we're going to find out by the end of the line, so to speak, William the Conqueror. He's not the end of the line. I mean, there will be future Dukes of Normandy, and we will talk about them in 2025. See how I use that bait?
Segue.
Yeah, trying to lure them into another term. Yeah. But oh my gosh, another. Can we get enough trees? I mean, it's like the forest of genealogy. It never ends. But seriously, I wanted you to see how the Normans, Richard I, Richard II, Robert, and then Brother Odo, we'll have plenty to say about him. And of course, the famous one, love child, William the Conqueror. Yes, this could be a love gone wrong, but I think it was a very nice union for its purpose. And then she remarried, or she married, and had a child. But that's where Odo and William come in, because they had the same mother, but some years apart, due to the fact that later on she would settle down, the mother, as they say, and be married. The brothers, had an interesting fraternal relationship, as brothers will do. And we'll talk about that also. But I just thought the tree was interesting, as you see how all this comes along. And by the time that William was Duke of Normandy, it's interesting that though illegitimate, he seemed to have been accepted as the Duke. You say, well, what about Odo? Well, he's more or less committed to the church. I say committed. I'm not sure so much in his heart, but by the exterior. But he was more on the fast track to authority, not go to parish priest. I want to work with the poor, pass out your food, or that sort of thing. I think he said, y'all can do that, but I've got to have power. I'm into the big P. And we'll talk more about that, because this is the 11th century, folks, and bishops are not always gonna be concerned about, now we got to get around to have all our confirmations and all of that. I think he's more concerned about his brother and how he could help him. Why would William the Conqueror say he was king of England? Because you would think there was already one. Harold. Well, I think there must have been some sort of William publicity department, don't you think? Somebody putting out in the media, Harold is a liar, a cheat, other bad things that you wouldn't say about people. William's Department of Publicity, as Duke of Normandy, will point out simply, my family was very close to his family. And he basically said I should be the king after him. I loved him to death. He loved me. You say, I hope there was no perjury involved. Well, maybe a little bit. Maybe people told lies. I'm not saying, but there's always that possibility. And to even add to this, according to the chroniclers, Harold had actually been captured in Normandy. They were always capturing each other, knights and holding them for bribery, because it's all about goods. It's not about killing folk. Well, I guess it is, but a wound will be just as good because then we can hold you and then they'll have to call fundraiser, have a fundraiser for bribe. Get you ransom, I should say. But basically, the claim will be that when Harold got out in Normandy, he had sworn, he said, William, I'm so thankful. This is before he became king. So it's a merci beaucoup and all that. He said, I just want you to know I am on the William bandwagon. I want you to be king. And you know what I'm going to do? Take an oath. I love to swear. So you say, isn't that possible perjury charges? Yeah. I mean, we're talking about, use a bad word. I know. Hold your breath. Damn, Harold. I know. I'm sorry. I'll try to not use that any more than I have to. Keep those ears closed. Yeah. I don't want you, unless you can prove you're 21. So you get the idea, though, but this is the idea of trying to make the argument that you are the true one. I'm the true ruler. But and I know that it's going to come by military force. You can sort of develop all of this publicity and all of that because it's not going to be nice. It's like, can we have a twin cost here or something like that? This is going to require military force. Meanwhile, yes, you figured I have to bring in a pope here. You say, well, what's he got to do with it? Oh, sorry you said that. I mean, all of these people are the subjects of the Pope. Remember, we've all gone baptized. No, that's another. Gregory, he will come up Urban II. This is Gregory VII. The significance of Gregory is basically, he's somewhat of a strategist, let's call him. Huh. So William's agents probably said to him, that Anglo Saxon crowd, they're not a very nice bunch. We Normans, you know what we think about popes? We love you. We love you very much. Please let me kiss your ring. You said, please. Gentle, but yeah, there's some heavy duty sucking up to Pope Gregory VII, aka Hildebrand, 1073, 1085. So we're getting close to the crusade, right? Yeah, I know you're getting excited. Because, it was probably in his heart, but we've got some other projects. And the other project, of course, is replacing the leadership of the church in England, as we will soon see. And Gregory, who was one of the most powerful of all medieval popes, will be, has little Christian power symbols in his head and thinking, wow, with these Normans, I think something beautiful is happening here. So there is what would you call it, Norman papal relationship? Because we also remember the Normans had taken over Sicily, some of you. So you say, but he should be at church and doing that. Yeah, that's nice too. But we also have time devoted to these kinds of issues. We would all like to just be saying mass or going to confession, doing all that. That's nice, but this is, real life. Because you see the poor soul is pretty stressed out. So there's so many reasons. Back to you know who. More or less the idea that the king, dare I say, aka King Harold Godwinson, saying all he had to worry about with the Normans is not true at all, because, well, you see, he doesn't look, I mean, he was probably really nice, loved his family and all that, but you can see that he was a pretty tough fellow. He also wanted to be king of England. Why? Well, because he had friends in England, and I could say in this political time, say the demand of the people and all that. I'm not so sure about that, but it is true that Harold had his own family members who didn't support him. And you say, you mean fraternal dissension? Yes, I do. He had the interesting name of Tostig, Earl of Northumbria. Maybe he was irritated at having Northumbria and he thought I should have a nicer area. I mean, I love sheep, don't get me wrong. And up there, you've been up there, I mean, many of you, and you know about Hadrian's Wall and all of the various sites you can see. But for whatever reason, Tostig did not like what he had. And apparently, he aided and abetted, as they say on the crime shows, the attempts of Harold Hardrada. I'd like for you, I'll use my mean, ugly voice. I want you to come on in and take over. Really? You would support me in that? Yeah, man, come on. Bring your Norwegian army. You got a lot of mean ones? Yeah. And you say, that sounds kind of lurid. Yes, I guess it was. If you were the English side and you say treachery at home, yeah, that no doubt about that. That this family of Anglo Saxons were not as they should have been. So, all of that, then Tostig supporting the efforts of Harold Hardrada. And you think of bringing all this area to what we would call Northern England, and what kind of force that would have been. And then Harold, who is probably very upset about Tostig, your kid brother is a traitor. And so, I mean, you were hurt, disappointed, but I guess you're kind of angry. What is it they said? Remember, Linda, in the movie, I'm mad as hell and I'm going to take it in. Yeah. So I imagine that's the way that the Harold felt. Because, I mean, Tostig was really hurtful. And a little bratty, too, I think. But again, I love Northumbria, and we all do.
Like for your step.
Yeah. There. So, all of this then is to a battle that, thanks to something starting with H, doesn't get the attention I think it should. So if you're out tonight on the streets of Ulm, and I would not urge you to do that at all, I'd tell you to go home. But if you were out there, I'm afraid there'll be a lot of negative responses. If you were to ask people Do you know the significance of the Battle of Stamford Bridge? You and I know, but I'm afraid these young folks use that Battle of Hastings. They go, of course, man. Come on, I'll buy you a drink. You know, that kind of thing. Not Stamford Bridge so much, and that's hurtful, very hurtful. But let's remember it because it was a great Harold victory. English won, Norse zip. I mean, it was a thorough battle. Harold and Tostig are set for the funeral home, the mortuary, because this was a thorough rout. This depiction may not exactly be true, but it is amazing to think of the idea. I mean, Harold Ryder was no just little old nothing. He was a big, big deal. And he must have had a very large force. And then when you figure that Tostig brought his forces and joined his spirit and all that, joined that, and then I just always think, sometimes I worry that we don't give Harold Godwinson the credit he deserved. We're so caught up in this sort of rush of enthusiasm about Normans, and that's hurtful, especially for you who are into Anglo-Saxons. Because I like to say this before 2025, because we're going to have Norman fever all through that term. You say, but what of the English? Have you nothing to say about them? No, you can come back in the spring and I'll say something. Again, this is a continuing saga. Okay, this is a Days of Our Lives course. It's not, you can't just rush it. Okay, so we understand then a great score. And then, of course, I love this map. 250 miles. Yeah. You got to be in really good shape like you. I mean, it's like only the hardiest. Because you've got to think about that English army. The army of Harold now goes down to Pevensey and Hastings. You may have been down there. It's a very nice area. Oh, and you remember the series about Hastings in World War II. Yeah, remember that? Yeah. Absolutely wonderful. And I loved all the scenery. And it's a very pretty place. I wouldn't think during World War II, but so much I wouldn't want to be there then. But it is quite a tourist place. And if I do say myself, a lot of Americans have put a lot of money into restoration and development there, Rockefeller money, for example. In any event, maybe prematurely, and some scholars actually think Harold made a mistake of immediately going southward with his troops to take on the Normans. And the Normans, with their horses, had quite a bit of time to prepare, to get themselves adjusted. And you think just after Stamford Bridge, and these poor souls have come all the way down there. Oh, yeah. I mean, it could not be a pleasant.
They were exhausted.
So the descriptions we have, you read the historian, and he is far from unbiased. He is not objective. His name is William Poitier. He has a, shall we say, Norman bias. As you would expect, I think he was the more or less the court historian. So English bad, Norman good, that sort of thing. But in his accounting, so they say 9 days, and then immediately begins the attack. And you remember the Anglo-Saxons, as far as I'm aware, did not use horses, and it was a very, very difficult experience. And yes, you said they were very tired, and the Normans. And of course, it wasn't just Normans. You realize there were people, I would say, people from a lot of different places who were there because there would be great opportunities. And I'll bet you, I'll tell you another group there who were not fighters, but they were there as supporters, shall we say. Because William of Poitiers tells us that, in fact, they had priests aboard who were carrying relics so that, everybody could hear the mass and hold the relics, because they said they knew they were going in and putting down sentencing, because they were coming in to bring righteousness. So that's how we're pitching it in William of Poitiers. It's not just like we're fighting for land and power, we're fighting against evil. Yeah. The hell crowd. They're all going down. So that's the account. And there are many interesting sites in Hastings. I'm not from the Chamber of Commerce, but I would really say this would be worth the trip. October 14th. Oh, and Harold is dead, and it was not pretty with all of the English casualties. And thinking about what will be the repercussions in terms of, now can we all be friends, or that sort of thing. It's hard, that relationship. It seems strained. Can we get past this Hastings business? You English, I'm Norman. I think I love you. No. No. There's a lot of difficulties. And we can see this, of course, in the church, in everything you want to think, in language. If you stop and think about the difference between Norman French and Anglo-Saxon English, if I can say it that way. But the idea was that the battle, October, and they're still waiting for a coronation because it took that long, I guess, to get these English a little still. You lost, that sort of thing. But the English were reluctant to accept it. I think that's fair to say. I mean, there's a lot of bitterness. We're coming back and we're going to be mean, that sort of thing. All of this is interesting in light of the fact that these Normans were so determined. They got remember the Wittern? That's it, got the Wittern together to approve William. And you say, I wonder why they did that. Would you think it would be a little forced, maybe? I mean, the bishops and the English nobles. I don't think they would say, now let's take a vote and let's see if you will agree. Is the word coercion possibly ring a bell? I don't think it was a nice process. And then a big ticker taper parade through. You can think my mind is just very imaginative, but it didn't happen that way, I can assure you. Ah, yes. Now all of us know about this. Many of you have seen it in person, or if you're not so fortunate, you could definitely see it online. It's an incredible Wouldn't you think? An incredible
Wow.
sight to think about people who are able to do that. Presumably, they were nuns who were either, or they could be lay people. I don't know. I don't, but I mean, it's all speculation. But the idea is that either the queen, more of her later, or perhaps Bishop Odo, the brother, had commissioned it. Because you think about the extent of this project and the involvement of all the people. But the events as they wanted them to show, I'm not saying I know any different, but I'm just saying that obviously this is their version. It's called, and again, the Bay Tapestry for the reason that it's there. Because actually it may have been produced in England, as far as we know, but they have it in Bayou, and I guess they do pretty well in the museum, because I don't think you go in for free, do you?
No.
How much are tickets?
Oh, I don't remember.
Okay, you've forgotten, yes, suppressed it, yes. I mean, because,
They did shut it down for,
oh yeah, for your
travels.
holiday. Because I'm thinking about going, how much I'd have had to go to Westminster Abbey. I haven't gotten over that yet, but I've moved on, you know, tried to understand. In any event, all of the fascinating things and thinking about how all of this was produced and more than my brain could figure out. But it is very interesting to think of this. This is what I found out. And this may have been in the booklet that came with the tour. The discovery, isn't that amazing? Shifting all those centuries, just and suddenly they find it with the 50 scenes. And again, all of this, the speculation, but whatever is the truth of how it was discovered, the significance of it cannot be disputed, I would say. The idea of the horses coming, I think coming across, the channel is another fascinating story to me of how that was done. And the idea of how King William had to persuade his troops that he wasn't dead. And they show that how great impact said, no, it's just a horse. It was Flicker. He's dead. But I'm fine. Thank you very much. Because he got on, I'm thinking, Lord, the Equestrian Society would not like this, because I think that man, he would go through horses like a lot of us. Yeah. But you'd say if you were anti-horse abuse, boy, those Normans could be right rough on, our friends, the horse community. Yeah. Now, let's say something about Odo. I know we love Dunstan. We all love Dunstan. But we always remember that everybody can't be a Dunstan. Some have to be like an Odo. And what does that mean? It means that sometimes a bishop's got to do what a bishop's got to do. Sometimes a bishop does not necessarily play by the church's rules. And what that means is sometimes a bishop has to act open, and that's Bishop Odo. The idea is showing how, without going to law school, and I like lawyers, don't get me wrong, so I'm not saying anything, I'm not anti-lawyer, no ABA complaints here. But I am saying that they're somewhat legalistic in that he's saying, I don't intend to shed blood. Heck no. I love human blood. I mean, not in a bad way. I mean, I would not want to shed any. I just want to love people. But since I am the future king's brother, I might need to hurt some people, or someone might try to hurt me. So I have a little device here that will help people be more obedient. So seriously, yeah, the maze, the devices, and that will be shown here, and it's very interesting to think about. That then you could go to sleep and say, oh, no bloodshed here. Well, I don't want to get into military tactics. I'm sure we have enough of that, but you can imagine some. Couldn't you get your brains bashed out?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking. That could be hurtful, but no bloodshed. So you're saying, isn't that a little legalistic? But I gather, I'm not sure any of the bishops would say, you know, Odo, that's very naughty. I hope you better bring that up in your priest and confession.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bad bishop, bad bishop. I'm not so sure about that. You know how people like to keep their jobs, right? But even bishops don't have tenure, right? It can be tough out there. Gee. Do you see that up there? Do you see Harold? At least they call him Rex King.
Yeah.
I thought that was real nice because, I mean, well, not nice, but usually they just called him Faker or something ugly, or because you know they thought he was going to hell.
Yeah, it was made in England.
Perjurer. You think, well, now that it's over, let's just all no. The villain of the piece. So there it is. Interfectus est is killed. But as you remember your Latin classes, so you'll know about that. But anyway, the idea of the deaths and the killings and so forth are very important in the story of the tapestry. Now, let's talk about Stigand. You say, oh, Archbishop Stigand. Now, Stigand had a lot of problems. He was, I can say, kiss up. That's a bad expression, but it would pretty much satisfy us for an explanation for him to King Harold, well, to the whole crowd. After Edward the Confessor's, you remember him, and then he had his Norman pets in, and then they got kicked out. That's how Stigand got in. He hung out with the family of King Harold. All of that is to say, the clock is ticking on Stigand's archiepiscopal career. The Battle of Hastings means that Stigand is pretty much used goods. Yeah, but I'm Archbishop, man. My power. Well, I think you can check that out. Do you see any Anglo-Saxons around now? I think you see Normans. As a result, Stiggins says, wow, let's get this whole coronation set up for Christmas Day. I'm excited, holly, all of that. Thanks, but no thanks. Merci, but no merci. Because basically, you can watch, but not participate. You think that would be very hurtful? But you know, it's like I suspect they probably were not that nice. They may have even called him names, abusive words. And to add hurt to hurt, the Archbishop of York was permitted to do it. You'll notice his name, Eldred of York. And what does that mean? It means it was an English archbishop. So that was not the point. But the point was Canterbury had to play second fiddle to York. You say, but we love each other. Give me a hug. No. In the game of primacy, when the York people get ahead of Canterbury, what should I call it? Hard feelings? Yeah. But Stiggins, I hope you've saved something. Because they ain't gonna be a golden parachute for you. Stiggins is lost. But the Archbishop of York will do the coronation Christmas Day, took some time in London. And you wonder what it was like there because they were Anglo-Saxon. I should call them English now. They were probably like, like when children, they don't get what they want. Howdy. You probably do that on certain days when you're serving. It's like, they don't say like, well, we just glad everybody's here and sharing. It's not like, yeah, exactly. They're going to get the lips and there's nothing, I guess they were happy about having an English clergyman there, but small compensation because they are losers. They just don't realize how much they're losers at this point. In any event, he was cramped. But I couldn't resist this. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I know this is just too good. This is William of Poitiers describing what happened on Christmas Day. And you're thinking everything is beautiful because you're thinking about the ceremonies we know from the coronation of the king and queen for that 2023. Yeah. And how lovely that was. And we're all so happy and it's Christmas. And not so much. This is William Poitiers now. But at the prompting of the devil, he gets around that devil.
He's everywhere.
Yeah, he's everywhere. Who hates everything good, a sudden disaster, and portents. Oh, we love portents. Of future catastrophes occurred. So when Archbishop Eldred asked the English, and then Geoffrey of Coutances asked the Normans, bilingual, which I thought was kind of interesting. You got your English and your French, but they all gladly shouted out with one voice, if not one language. Yes. That kind of thing. You were all so excited there at Canterbury. The armed guard outside, hearing the tumult, imagined that some treachery was afish and rationally set fire to some of the buildings. I know. And you're thinking like, where was Smokey when we needed him? Yeah, I mean, this is definitely not. The fire spread, the crowd that been rejoicing took fright, throngs of men and women. But anyway, this is from William of Poitiers. Only the bishop and the clergy remain. Yeah, let's hear it. R.C. Church, yes. And with difficulty completed the consecration of the king, who was trembling from head. I guess he thought, They were trying to blow him up. Yeah, they definitely. But it's an interesting tale, isn't it, when you think about. Didn't you think William and Matilda was so disappointed when you think, oh, remember, hon, when we became king and queen and how happy we were? But yeah, that would kind of bring you down when you think about this kind of the devil's arsonist or whatever. The Battle Abbey, rather, was built later at the behest and probably the endowment of the king, and you may have seen the building, because now I think it's more or less given there in Hastings to historical traditions, museum type stuff. It was a girls' school for many years, but I think it's gone through many lives during this period, but you can see it when you are there and understand Battle Abbey. And it was very significant. It was a beautiful Benedictine house, and a funny thing happened in the 16th century. Yes. 6 wives. Yes. Yeah.
Don't worry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was Battle Abbey, which was very, very important. And of course, now, as a historic relic, and you say, I wonder why the Conqueror was endowing Abbey there. Oh, well, good works. I made some boo-boos, but now look how the church is going to benefit. And those Benedictines, they're going to be right there until Henry VIII comes along. So, what will happen? Well, we're going to have, I would think, many people would think, a complete revolution in terms of, I hate that word, but the changeover that people may not have really appreciated completely on that Christmas Day in 1066. Because for a long time, relatively long, 2 or 3 years, I think William basically said, maybe we can all come along and our new English friends can adjust. I know, they can take some Norman French classes and we can all work together to achieve a new and better. So, no, the English are so, shall I say, unpleasant about all of this that William says, you had a chance and you blew it. So, you know what we're going to do? We're going all Norman all the time. And you know what you are, English? Losers. And that is pretty much what will happen. A new royal dynasty. And we'll talk more about that in 2025. Just in case I didn't mention that before. The Wetton, now the Curia Regis. And of course, you think, well, Wetton was a nice word. English? I think not. We're in for Latin. All Latin all the time. Alfred, who was he? I mean, it's like, it's like rewriting history and that sort of thing. It's quite, they don't have an Alfred Appreciation Day anymore and all of the rest. Because, and this is always amazing, even since I've been 18 probably, it's like the replacement of whole class of ruling people. Because of course I asked the teacher, I said, how could they do that? And then he said, we'll talk about it another time, or something of that order. Yeah, troubling. Because have you ever thought about how difficult that would be? But it was basically a real estate revolution. All of those powerful English people, and they're not going to say, well, gee, can we work something out? Maybe a relationship? How about a marriage? No. I think you folks And now I'm afraid you're gonna ask me, yeah, I should know this, if we had an answer. What became of these people? I don't know. I think they would take an early retirement. You're not gonna be any great noble anymore. Say, well, maybe you have a golden parachute. I'm not sure we're ready for that yet. You were just out, you were displaced. There might have been 2 English bishops left, which is very, very interesting because you may not remember this, but we went to one of those bishoprics, but it's Worcester, I believe it was. But it was not at all, shall we say, kind to the English who had been in authority. Of course, the Normans always said, well, you have a chance, and you blew it. And so the Norman takeover will be thorough. Feudal institutions, because we already know about those horses, Black Beauty and Flicka, they are that. I know, remember Black Beauty? Yeah, I always think about horses we have known and loved. But that will be important for the future. Why? Because when we Normans take over, so do our institutions. And we will think about the development of the castles. There are still, I think, remnants in Wales and elsewhere. And you can get the idea of castles not necessarily as a place of luxury for people to live in, far from it, but as military installations to keep people the straight and narrow. In any event, the idea is the English didn't have this before. Now, I love the question I've gotten over all the years. It was like, what happened to the peasants? I said, they're still there and they are still working, procreating, and dying. It's not like there's going to be some great change in the peasantry. And as far as the Normans are concerned, don't you think these Normans aren't going to say, gee, I guess I'm going to stay in England, so I'm going to let my Norman property go? They're going to be, I guess, what we would call medieval commuters. They just going back and forth. So we can assume that was quite a busy highway time as far as people who had interest, and many did. Many did. As many of you were aware, Odo, being his brother's valuable associate, actually became an English earl. And you say, doesn't that create psychological problems? Which am I? Am I a bishop? Am I an earl? I can be different things at different times. What would you like for me to be? Because as an English earl, he could be mean. And because that's a lay position, you say, but psychologically, I imagine that would create problems. No, he seemed to do real well with it. I think it just means more power, more authority, and that sort of thing. Do you think you had to mention this in confession? No, I think he was okay with it. But I think it's always interesting. Again, I'm not sure how it would work in case of a monastery. Are they going to throw out every English monk? And I would doubt that, or English non. But I'm thinking if you're a person of any authority, abbot, abbess, that sort of, I would think it's probably time for you to get in the choir and just go to choir practice. And I know, maybe you're ready to be a reader or, Thorough as they call it. But basically you don't have to worry about any power issues anymore. We have it all taken care of. That's why we're Normans. But we need people to work though. And that's what you're here. Seriously, I'm always thinking about that though. What does it mean? Well, it means, I think I mentioned there were only 2 English bishops left. Meaning remaining. I don't mean they killed them like they did some of the Catholic bishops in Henry VIII's day, but I am saying that they were no longer in authority, which is a way of saying there is Norman patronage within the church. And what are the folks in Rome saying? Boy, this was a good decision. Remember, Gregory VII, he was thinking about all this stuff. He wasn't Pope yet, but he was already developing it. Because remember what you can always do, you pull out that IOU, say, I was here. Or rather, Peter was right here. Saint Peter was right here helping you. And you won. Yeah. So what are we going to get out of it? The issue of acknowledging papal rights will become a sticky one. Because even through, we often mention Henry VIII, there will always be that issue of how much power does the Pope have in England. Not that the Pope didn't have other things to think about. I guess those of us who are Anglophiles think there are 24/7 England issues, but there are other concerns. But it is true that they did have concerns about this because we love it when the king bows down and says, you know what? You're not only the vicar of Christ, but you are my Lord. I love your feet because I want to kiss them. And you think, gosh, will you do what you feel is best? Because with that kind of feeling will come, of course, financial compensations. Little tax will be involved. And of course, as the papacy will have its own moves towards change, improvement, and power growth, that will involve Normans. It's a very strange situation, and yet not so strange at all, because the Norman upper class, shall we say, would have been involved in all this in any event, but it's just bringing England into it now that it is Norman controlled. And it is amazing when we think, it's still England, but the English influence for these centuries, as we'll see in 2025, is still a major factor. Now, when we think about styles, some of you have been up here. It is the Church of England now, and I'm sure it looks differently now. It looks much more, what we say, 21st century, Episcopalian, Church of England, Anglican. But you'll notice there are no statues of the Blessed Virgin Mary, so that's sort of the Tudor effects. But significant for us is the utilization of the Romanesque architectural style. It's up in the North England, as you will know. Gosh, coal mining back in the day and all of that. Still, not necessarily a pleasant place. I got to see it by getting off the train for a few minutes, and doing the tour, but it's not terribly yeah. I don't know about how much coal mining is going on up there now, but I do know that it is amazing. I mean, just seeing it through the window of the rail car, I was very impressed. Not that the community was so exciting. Don't mean to be ugly. You have friends on the Chamber of Commerce. Don't tell them I said that because I know that I have to accept the way things are. No telling what the charges are to go in and see it nowadays. Moreover, of course, people will say, and this is counter factual history. What if they had stayed with Denmark and Norway? How different history would have been. But it didn't, and they didn't. We know, in fact, that these areas, I don't know, I guess they still would maybe tell the kids about canoes. Yeah, and say, gosh, you didn't know about this, but we used to have Danish rulers and we had some. I don't know, maybe they just didn't tell them anything about pre-Norman, but it is definitely true that the relationship now became very Euro-centered in the sense of Western Europe rather than Northern Europe. And that will be very, very important in terms of relations. Do I need to tell you about Anglo-French relations? Lord, that is really big, really big. Love, hate, I call it. And it goes on. Slaves, they say, basically went out of use, which is very interesting to me to think about. Slavery had gone on during Anglo-Saxon times. You think, why did it stop now? Well, they say that they were no longer particularly useful because, as slaves have to be provided for and taken care of. And now we have a class with a word to call them that refers to nobody in this room. Churls. But none of you are churls. All fine people who want to be here in 2025. I know. That's my last one. I know. I should be ashamed, but I'm not. The churls, or landed peasants, will be a combination, or had been, the peasants with land in the Anglo-Saxon times. But because of the Normans, they say they will now become serfs. Serfs with certain amounts of rights, and change will come about with that too. But serfs are not slaves, as they always say in the history classes. You never ever say that. Serf has land. I'm not saying it's good life, but they say it's better than being a slave. So that was a change that would go on. People often mention the churl simply because in Anglo-Saxon times they would talk about the day of the small farmer, and they were fighting in the ford and devoted to the all of that. It was good in the American Revolution for propaganda purposes. That was some of the changes, and we'll be ready to talk about that in Norman times when I see you again. When? 2025. Yes, indeed. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Thank y'all for coming.